Okay, folks, we're ready to get started. I'm going to introduce the Honorable Magistrate Brian Fields, who will be presiding over our presentation today. And I'm going to put myself on mute and hide my camera and get you guys ready to go. Okay, Magistrate Fields, are you ready to get us started here with the opening information? Okay, Magistrate Fields, I don't know if you can hear me. I just tried to chat you to see if you're ready to get us started now. Okay, and so you can go ahead. Hold on for just a second.
Yes.
All right. Coordinator, can you hear? Do I just say everyone?
Okay, folks, we're having a little bit of trouble with the live stream. I'm showing that I've got a live stream streaming, but the folks on the other end aren't seeing it. So give me just a second to try to work out this difficulty.
Magistrate Fields, can you hear the court now?
Magistrate Fields, we can hear you now. That's great. So we're working on getting the.
That's
Hang on for just a second, you guys. All right, Magistrate Fields, we think we've got the live stream difficulty worked out. There was a little bit of a delay there, so we're ready to go for you if you're ready to get us started.
All right, just let me know if we have any more difficulties. Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to inquire from each side. Is each team ready for trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Carnation is ready.
Okay, thank you for that. Has each side provided the scoring panelists with copies of the roster and the team's codes? Has that been accomplished already? I'm assuming it has. I'm going to go ahead and move on. I'm going to confirm that if video recorders are present and being used, that both teams have approved the taping of this round. All right, I'm going to advise that the Colorado Bar Association may be taking photographs or recording the competition during this round, and that team participation in the state tournament grants automatic permission in the use of these photos by the Colorado Bar Association. I'm going to remind all teams that there will be no recesses allowed, with the exception of those granted for health emergencies. I'm going to ask if each scoring panelist individually has any reason to be biased by the judging team. So I would just defer to each scoring panelist if you can answer yay or nay.
This is Karen Shirley, nay.
Katie Heimbichner, nay.
Tyler Baker, nay.
Thank you. I'm going to remind both teams and their respective coaches that if any disputes arise out of this competition, it must be reported in accordance with the competition rules. I'm going to remind each team that their compliance with time requirements will be considered in scoring individual performances. I'm going to ask each side to introduce the participating team members, attorneys, and witnesses. Starting with Team Carnation, please. Or I'll start with Team Violet.
Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel, my name is Jasmine Machievich, and I will be delivering the direct examination of Dakota Weirs, the cross-examination of Skylar Weirs, and the plaintiff's closing statement. At this time, I would like to ask your permission for my co-counsel to introduce themselves.
So granted.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Danielle McGowan. I will be delivering the direct examination of Carson Durst as well as the cross-examination of Blake Doncourt.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Ben Okung, and I will be delivering the direct examination of Dr. Casey Rogers and the cross-examination of Dr. Devin Williams, as well as the opening for the plaintiff team. Thank you.
Your Honor, I would now like to ask your permission for the plaintiff's witnesses to introduce themselves.
Ms. McJivick, I'm just going to ask you to repeat that, please.
Your Honor, I would like to now ask your permission for the plaintiff's witnesses to introduce themselves.
So granted.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. I am Cesar Aguirre. I will be portraying Dakota Weirs for you today.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. My name is Daniel Jones, and I'll be playing Carson Durst.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. I am Tanner Bertram, and I will be playing the role of Dr. Casey Rogers.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Jackson Pagano, and I am the timekeeper.
Your Honor, we have no further introductions.
All right, thank you, Team Violet. Team Carnation?
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Perry. I will be performing the direct examination of Casey Rogers and the direct examination of Blake Doncourt and the cross examination of Casey Rogers. And I would now ask for permission for the co-counsel to introduce themselves.
So granted.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Ryan Pack, and I will be doing the direct examination of Skylar Weirs and the cross-examination of Carson Durst. Turn on your camera.
Good morning, or good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Edward Thompson, and I will be performing the direct of Dr. Devin Williams. And I'll be in the cross-examination of Dakota Weirs. I would now like to ask for permission for the witnesses to introduce themselves.
So granted.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Anna Benevento, and I will be playing Blake Doncourt.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Olivia Gallo, and I will be playing Skylar Weirs.
No further objections, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right, at this time, I'm going to ask all members to stand for the swearing in. In an effort to maintain a level of professionalism and to uphold the code of ethical conduct during and after these mock trial proceedings, all members of the gallery, the swearing panels, and the teams shall stand for the swearing in the oath of the code of ethical conduct. Starting with team members, I'm going to ask the team members, please raise your right hand. We have everybody. Do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and the rules of mock trial competitions? Okay. Witnesses. If all the witnesses can please stand and turn on your cameras. Raise your right hand. You promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of mock trial competition. Gallery members. Including teachers, attorney coaches, family members, and friends. You can please stand and raise your right hand. Do you promise to represent yourselves as positive role models and to behave in a manner that exemplifies ethical and professional sportsmanship during and after this mock trial round? All right, scoring, thank you. Scoring panelists. I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of mock trial competition? All right, thank you. All right, at this time, the court is going to allow opening statements. Starting with, go ahead.
May I proceed?
You may.
This case is all about a high school student whose dreams of becoming a world-class piano player one day were destroyed when he developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma caused by the defendant's product, Lush fertilizer. Dakota Wares is 18 years old. He gets good grades, he works hard in school, and he is an active member of his community. You'll learn that he was a member of the National Honor Society, president of his high school student government, and even found the time to volunteer at a local homeless shelter. You'll learn that more than anything else, Dakota loved to play the piano, and that when he was just 7 years old, he used to sit on his grandfather's knees, learning about each sound and how each key would feel under his fingers, learning how each chord would come together. He started to take lessons soon after his grandfather passed away and got to a point where he loved it so much that he practiced several hours a day. He dreamed of becoming a world-class piano player, and you'll learn that he was well on his way to making those dreams a reality. He even had gotten a full-ride scholarship to Juilliard, one of the finest music conservatories in the world. His dreams were just at his fingertips until a year ago, when things began to take a turn. Just before he was about to leave for Juilliard, he began to feel sick all the time. He experienced rapid weight loss and was tired constantly. He had chest pain, swollen and painful lymph nodes, and he could not stop coughing. He was in so much pain, and he was so tired that he could not sit at the piano for more than a few minutes, therefore making a recital or performance impossible. He saw countless doctors and underwent one test after another before he was finally diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. You may be asking, how could this happen? How could one young life be changed so drastically, seemingly overnight? Well, you'll hear that in addition to his school, piano, homework, and voluntary work, Dakota also worked at a local landscape company, where his responsibilities included cutting lawns, trimming hedges, and applying a product called Lush fertilizer. You'll hear that this product was rushed to the market despite evidence that its key component, a bonding agent called Drufo, was carcinogenic. And you'll hear that despite knowing that baking or heating its product would remove any risks that it was carcinogenic, Lush Fertilizer's CEO chose not to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our job to prove to you that the defendant, Lush Fertilizers, was negligent and caused Dakota's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And we must prove these things to you by the preponderance of the evidence, which simply means that they are more likely true than not. We will meet our burden by calling 3 witnesses. First, you will hear from Dakota Wares. He will explain his life before and after he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He will explain to you that despite working with Lush Fertilizers for almost 4 years, nobody ever warned him that it was carcinogenic, and nobody ever warned him that he might be putting his life in danger by simply going to work. Second, you will hear from Carson Durst. He was a product development engineer on the research and development team at Lush Fertilizers for 4 years. He will tell you that Lush Fertilizer executives knew that Drufo may be linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but decided to keep that information away from the public and did nothing to make sure it was safe for the public. And finally, you will hear from Dr. Casey Rogers, who has a PhD in agriculture and entomology. Dr. Rogers will explain how Drufo was rushed to the market without sufficient studies to its safety. He will describe to you how he performed his own study that led to his conclusion that prolonged exposure to Drufo causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he believes this to a high degree of medical probability. Ladies and gentlemen, at the conclusion of this case, after you have heard all the facts and the evidence, my co-counsel Jasmine Macievich will again walk you through the facts and the evidence and explain to you why Lush Fertilizer was negligent in rushing Drufo to the market without an appropriate warning label. And she will ask you to find Lush Fertilizer liable for causing Dakota's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Team Carnation, opening statements.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Ryan Pack, and I am a defense lawyer within the case, along with my co-counsel, Emily Perry and Edward Thompson. Any given day in court provides an opportunity to serve justice. This opportunity is presented to all of you today to make a difference. This case today deals with the false accusations of negligence on Lush Fertilizer's products regarding the product labeling to prevent any unreasonable risk or harm to its users. However, by doing so, we must not ignore the facts that Dakota Wears, a user of Lush Fertilizer, deliberately disregarded these product labels. The plaintiff is directly tasked to prove 4 arguments. At the center of these arguments is the definition of reason and expectation. Lush Fertilizer counted on reason and expectation in this case. And yet, here we are today. Today, you will hear from 3 witnesses on the defense. First, you will hear from Blake Doncourt, the proactive CEO of Lush Fertilizer. He will describe to you his background and accolades as a result of starting Lush Fertilizers from the values of humanitarianism. Additionally, he will express his unexpected accusation as he positively affirmed his actions. Next, you will hear from Skylar Weirs, Dakota's twin sister. The Skylar is able to look past the unreasonable claims made by her sister and focus purely on the facts of reasoning. Skylar will clearly define her research on modern agritech and its effects within and outline the reduced use of pesticides directly reducing the chances of a link with cancer. Finally, you will hear from Dr. Devin Williams, who will clearly state the various other chemicals that Dakota could have been exposed to while disregarding the safety protocols from Lush Fertilizer. From his expertise in toxicology, Devin Williams will be able to clearly define the reduced harmful effects from Lush's use of Drufo while also following the expected precautionary risks. Today, you will also hear from the plaintiff. First, you will hear from Dakota Weirs, the twin sibling of Skylar Weirs. Dakota, during his time under Haven Landscaping, failed to follow the covering regulations on his skin and faced that were clearly defined in the safety precautions in the labeling of Lush's product, proving Lush's expected precautionary measures to prevent the risk of harm. Next, you will hear from Carson Durst, a supposed trusted companion to the Doncourt family. However, this trust has been corrupted as his expectations of preserving confidentiality to Lush Fertilizer were contradicted. Mr. Durst, who has time and time again failed to provide a valid reason for leaving Lush Fertilizer, did not wait the full 2-year agreement outlined within the confidentiality statements, only waiting 6 months before being employed to the competitor Terra's Greenery, directly going against trade materials within the agreement stated. Finally, you will hear Dr. Casey Rogers, whose studies hold no peer support or replication capabilities. Casey has only been able to study the effect of Drufo on landscapers, rather focusing his attention on farmers and gardeners, which is not reasonable in today's case. Lush Fertilizer is clearly not responsible for the unfortunate circumstances that Dakota is facing. It is not reasonable to assume that Lush is responsible for the lack of cautionary risks as the hazard label is clearly defined on the products define the specific regulations of use. It is always expected for the user to follow these regulations in their own jurisdictions, facing consequences otherwise. I encourage all to listen carefully and shed your bias and see the facts, this case, for what they are. Let the law follow reason and expectation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Counselor. All right. Team Violet, your first witness.
Your Honor, we would like to call Dakota Weirs to the stand. May I proceed?
You may, thank you.
Please state your name for the record.
Dakota Weirs.
Mr. Weirs, can you tell the jury why you're here today?
I'm here today because I developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma after using Lush Fertilizers product in my job for years.
When were you first diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
I was first diagnosed a little over a year ago, right before I was about to set out for Juilliard College.
Can you tell us about your symptoms?
I started feeling chest pains. I have frequent chills. I had rapid weight loss and minor fatigue.
Did you see a doctor about your symptoms?
I did. I saw so many doctors, but it felt like nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. After what felt like hundreds of doctors' visits and tests, I was finally diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Mr. Weirs, tell us about your life before you developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. How did you spend your time?
Objection, Your Honor. Compound question.
Response, Counselor.
Your Honor, this question is, I asked one singular question. I did not ask two questions. I simply asked him to extrapolate on his life before he developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Overruled.
I did not request any further information. Thank you. So, Dakota, tell us about your life before you developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. How'd you spend your time?
I spent my time doing so many things, it's almost hard to
Objection, Your Honor. That is two questions. Asking how you spend your time, as well as talking about what you did before, are two separate questions.
Counselor, that is sustained. Please re-ask your question.
Mr. Weirs, how did you spend your time before you developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Well, I spent my time doing so many things, it's almost hard to count. I loved school. I loved my extracurriculars. I would volunteer whenever I could. But more than anything else, I loved playing the piano. It was my passion in life. I picked it up from my late grandfather. I would, whenever I could, outside of practicing or outside of volunteering and schoolwork, I would find any time to practice the piano.
Did you win any awards or competitions for your piano playing?
I did. I was featured in a number of recitals that I won, and people would come all over the state just to hear me play. But my most proud achievement is earning a full ride scholarship to Juilliard.
Can you tell us what Juilliard is?
I might be a little biased here, but Juilliard is the best music conservatory in the world, located in the beautiful city of New York with some amazing alumni like Nina Simone and composer John Williams.
Mr. Weirs, what else did you do before you were diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Well, whatever little free time I had outside of extracurriculars and volunteering, I would work at a small landscaping company to make some money for school.
Where were you working when you were diagnosed?
I was working at Haven Landscaping, a small locally owned landscaping company.
And how long had you been working there?
By the time I was diagnosed, I'd been working there about 4 years.
What were your job responsibilities like?
Well, since when I joined, I wasn't quite old enough to work the big machinery. I was mostly responsible for spreading seed and fertilizer.
Did you like your job, Mr. Weirs?
I loved my job. I loved being able to work outdoors. I loved being able to work with my hands. I loved being able to go to new places every day, as we had all sorts of interesting clientele.
In their opening statement, Lush Fertilizer's attorney said that you did not follow the safety instructions on Lush Fertilizer's label. Is that true?
That's not true at all. The label only made...
Objection, Your Honor. That's a leading question.
Response?
Your Honor, I'm simply asking the witness to provide his opinion on an experience that he had.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Weirs, in their opening statement, Lush Fertilizer's attorney said that you did not follow the safety instructions on Lush Fertilizer's label. Is that true?
That's not true at all. The label only made some slight suggestions about how the product should be used or what it might do if it gets in your eyes. There was nothing about anything being required or what could happen if you didn't follow these suggestions.
Your Honor, I'd like to show opposing counsel Plaintiff's Exhibit 1. May I have permission to share this exhibit on the screen?
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Granted.
Mr. Weirs, do you recognize what has previously been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 1?
Yes,
What is it?
it's a Lush Fertilizer bottle label.
Is this a fair and accurate photo of the label for Lush fertilizer that you used during your job as a landscaper?
It is.
Your Honor, I'd like to offer Plaintiff's Exhibit 1 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 1 is admitted.
Your Honor, permission for co-counsel to publish Plaintiff's Exhibit 1 to the jury.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Weirs, did you take any safety measures while using Lush fertilizer?
No, I didn't, but nothing was required by my job. My boss might occasionally suggest that we wear masks while working with chemicals, but
Objection, Honor. Hearsay. You cannot explain what the boss may have said.
Response.
Your Honor, my witness is simply explaining his experience at his job, and he is fully qualified to do so.
Sustained. Counsel re-ask the question.
Mr. Weirs, what safety measures did you take while using Lush fertilizer?
well, while using Lush Fertilizer, I didn't take any safety measures. I was never told off when I didn't. So it really felt like more of a suggestion rather than a requirement. And when I was met with the label saying you would be recommended to use an N95 mask when working with the fertilizer, it was much too hot and I could barely breathe if I had put on that N95 mask. We were also technically supposed to wear long sleeves and pants when working with the fertilizer, but it was much too hot and nobody around me, as I could see, was wearing long sleeves or pants. We just wore t-shirts and shorts. So it really felt like more of a suggestion.
Did you ever get in trouble for not covering your face or the rest of your body while working with the fertilizer?
As I said, I never got told off, and as far as I could see, nobody around me got told off for not following these suggestions. So I never got the impression that anybody I worked with or my boss thought it could actually be dangerous to use.
Did you have any reason to
Objection,
believe?
Your Honor. Speculation by the witness.
Response, counsel.
Your Honor, my witness is testifying to his own experience at at Havens Landscaping.
Overruled.
So, Mr. Weirs, did you have any reason to believe that using Lush fertilizer could cause harm to your health?
No, as you can see, there's nothing on the label that could suggest that it could cause anything to my health. So, and there wasn't anybody around me telling me that anything could happen to me as a result of using this fertilizer.
Can you please read the first active ingredient on the label for the jury?
Drufo.
Did you know what Drufo was when you were using Lush fertilizer?
No, I had no idea what Drufo was. If I did, I would never have even gotten near the stuff.
Mr. Weirs, does the Lush fertilizer label in Exhibit 1 use the word carcinogen anywhere in the ingredient list?
No, it doesn't say that anywhere.
Does the label tell you that you must wear a mask while using Lush fertilizer?
No.
Does it tell you what might happen if you don't wear a mask while using Lush fertilizer?
No, it doesn't say that anywhere.
Does the label tell you anything about what might happen to you if you use Lush fertilizer?
No, it just says it might irritate my
Objection,
eye.
Your Honor. That's asked and answered.
Response, counsel.
Your Honor, the question asked was individual from the other questions previously asked and clarified a different information for the jury.
Overruled.
Mr. Weirs, does the label tell you anything about what might happen to you if you use Lush fertilizer?
No, it didn't say anything about that. It just said it could irritate my eyes.
So when did you first start exhibiting symptoms of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered. She already gave she already asked when the witness started developing symptoms before this questionnaire.
A response?
Your Honor, I am re-asking this question simply to provide a new line of questioning to reveal the witness's experiences.
Overruled.
So, Mr. Weirs, when did you first start exhibiting symptoms of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
As I said, I first started exhibiting symptoms just over a year ago, right before I was set to leave for Juilliard.
And how has having non-Hodgkin's lymphoma impacted your life?
Well, I have all sorts of symptoms. I've had rapid weight loss, chills, chest pains, fatigue, but the worst part of all is I don't even have the strength to sit at the piano anymore. If I sit for more than 10 minutes, I'll be bruised.
Did you end up accepting your scholarship to Juilliard?
No, unfortunately, I wasn't able to. The school has allowed me to defer my scholarship for a year, but I don't think my symptoms are going to get any better anytime soon.
Is there a cure for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
No, unfortunately, I've been informed there isn't. I'll have to live like this for the rest of my life.
Objection, Your Honor. That is not assuming facts, not evidence.
Counsel, response?
Your Honor, my witness is fully capable of testifying to those facts as they affect his entire life experience.
On that specific objection, it is overruled.
Mr. Weirs, what do you want out of this lawsuit?
It's really hard to say what I want. More than anything, I wish I could just go back to my normal life and play the piano again. I wish I could go back to volunteering. I wish I could go back to being the head of my student government, but I know none of that's going to happen. More than anything, I just want to hold Lush Fertilizer responsible and make sure that nobody else has to go through what I went through ever again.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Counselor, any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead, your witness.
Dakota, is it true that you were told to wear proper safety equipment at Haven, correct?
My boss might have suggested that I wear some safety equipment, yes.
Then your boss, understanding the risks, attempted to get you to wear that equipment, correct?
I don't recall if they specifically ever told me off or tried to get me to wear that equipment especially.
But your boss did request you to wear that equipment, correct?
They might have once or twice mentioned it over the 4 years, yes.
Is it true you used fertilizers other than Drupfo at your work?
I might have used other fertilizers, but I would say that the main fertilizer was probably Lush Fertilizer.
But it is true you used other fertilizers, correct?
On occasion, I might have, yes.
Then you cannot be certain that Drupfo caused your ailment?
Well, I can be almost certain. I saw a story on the news about how Drupfo was possibly carcinogenic and rushed through development.
But as an expert witness that does not understand exactly what is in Drupfo, you cannot per se say that Drupfo was the cause of your ailment, correct? Especially as you used other fertilizers, correct?
All I can say is that I can believe to a high degree of certainty myself that Drupfo is the sole responsibility of my non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
That's it, Your Honor.
Any redirect, Counselor?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Weirs, may I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Yes, you may.
Mr. Weirs, how old were you when you first started working at Haven's Landscaping?
I was only 14.
Did you have any awareness of what could happen to you if you used Lush fertilizer?
No, I didn't see anything on the label. There was nothing told to me. So I really thought I was just working a job to put myself through school.
So did the label say that any sort of precautionary measures were required when using the product, or did it simply recommend it?
As I said, these were just some minor recommendations every now and then from my boss or on the label.
Did Lush fertilizer's label communicate in any way that the product could cause harm to your health?
No, it didn't say anything about that. The only thing it said is what would happen if it got into my eyes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Counselor, any recross?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
This witness is excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Counselor, your next witness.
Your Honor, we would like to call Carson Durst to the stand.
Mr. Durst, remind you that you remain under oath. All right, Counselor, your witness.
May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name for the jury.
Carson Durst, spelt D-U-R-S-T.
Why are you here today, Mr. Durst?
So I'm here today because I believe I can give my own personal opinion that Drufo is in fact carcinogenic and that Lush Fertilizer knew about it.
What is your educational background?
I graduated from Arizona State University with a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering.
Where are you currently employed?
I am currently employed as the head of the research and development team at Terra's Greenery.
Can you tell me about your occupation history before Terra's Greenery?
So before working at Terra's Greenery, I actually worked at Lush Fertilizer.
And how did you find that job at Lush Fertilizer?
So my job at Lush Fertilizer began as an internship, actually. And 3 months into the internship at Lush Fertilizer, I got promoted to a full-time product development engineer.
Did you meet the qualifications for your promotion?
I absolutely met the qualifications. I was working at a higher rate than all of my coworkers, and that's what gave me the promotion.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation. The attorney is trying to employ a speculation on whether he had the qualifications or not to be employed in the job.
Counselor, response?
Your Honor, I'm asking the witness as to whether or not he believes that with his personal experience and knowledge, if he believes that he met the qualifications for the promotion at his own job.
Overrule. This witness can answer.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, did you meet the qualifications for your promotion?
Yeah, I absolutely met the qualifications. I was, in fact, working at a higher rate than my coworkers.
What were your responsibilities as a product development engineer at Lush Fertilizer?
So we worked on the development and testing of new fertilizers.
Were you required to apply your degree in chemical engineering in your work on the research and development team at Lush Fertilizer?
Absolutely, I was. If I didn't have my degree or my knowledge, I wouldn't have been able to do my job properly at Lush Fertilizer or at Terra's Greenery.
Your Honor, we would like to offer Mr. Durst as an expert in agricultural chemical testing.
Response?
Your Honor, I now oppose Carson Durst as an expert witness within that field because he did not provide any qualifications under his specific career, which was his first job out of college, which provides no qualifications or training necessary in order to be an expert witness in this case.
Counsel, brief response?
Your Honor, I'd like to lay further foundation.
You may.
Mr. Durst, you didn't just work in chemical testing for your 4 years at Lush Fertilizer, right?
I didn't only work at.
Your Honor, objection. Leading question.
Sustained.
It is assumed.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
The objection sustained, so rephrase. Sustained as to leading.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, how long have you worked in chemical testing?
I've worked in the chemical testing field for almost 20 years now with my work at Lush Fertilizer and Terrace Greenery combined.
And what have you done? Like, what were your duties with your job?
We tested chemicals and fertilizers in an agriculture environment.
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered. This has been already asked and already answered within the questions.
Overruled. The counselor is laying additional foundation. You may continue, Counselor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, again, with the further foundation we've laid as to how long Mr. Durst has worked in the field of agricultural testing, we would again like to move Mr. Durst to be an expert. We have shown through his experience that he is qualified to testify as an expert in agricultural testing.
Okay. With that additional foundation, Mr. Durst will be so qualified.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, permission for a constructive sidebar.
Permission granted.
Mr. Durst signed a non-disclosure agreement with Lush Fertilizer, which prohibits him from disclosing information about his work at Lush Fertilizer. Because this disclosure of information is essential for the jury to understand Mr. Durst's expert opinions, we ask that the court order Mr. Durst be permitted to discuss his work and any information he gained at Lush Fertilizer that is relevant to his own expert opinions.
Counselor, any response?
No objection, Your Honor.
Mr. Durst, the court is going to order that you testify as to your involvement within the context of this case.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, during your research, did you come to any conclusions about the safety of Drufo?
Yes, it's my own personal opinion that Drufo is in fact carcinogenic.
And what did you rely on in coming to that conclusion?
So there were multiple things that led me to my conclusion, but the thing that started my suspicions was actually a research document I found from England stating that a chemical compound inside of Drufo is actually carcinogenic in rats.
Were you able to find any studies that tested whether the chemical compound had any adverse effects on humans?
I was unable to find any studies if the chemical was dangerous to humans, but that's because it is quite simply unethical to test these type of things on humans. So you're not really going to find any research on it.
So what did you do with this new information?
So all of the information we took with our studies at Lush Fertilizer was compiled into lab notebooks. And these lab notebooks were actually taken by Jerry Langley, the head of the research, and then sent up to senior management as like a report.
Did Jerry Langley order any other studies to be done?
Why, yes, Jerry actually ordered a study on whether Drufo was specifically whether Drufo was specifically carcinogenic in humans.
When did she order this new study?
She ordered the study in September of 2003.
Permission to share Exhibit 4 on the screen for your honor, opposing counsel, and the witness to refer to.
Any objection, Counselor?
No objections, Your Honor.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, do you recognize this document?
Yes, this is an email that Jerry sent us that ordered the new study.
Is this a fair and accurate copy of the email you received?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, permission to publish Exhibit 4 to the jury.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, did Ms. Langley explain why she wanted a new study?
All Ms. Langley said about the new study was that she wanted to confirm results from.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. You're asking the witness to say what another person said.
Overruled. This witness has been qualified and endorsed as an expert witness. He may opine as to what others have advised him based on his to assist in his opinion. So overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, did Ms. Langley explain why she wanted a new study?
Yeah, so like I said, Jerry just said that she ordered a new study specifically to confirm results from the previous study.
Did you participate in the second study?
I did, in fact, participate in the second study.
What did the team's research find?
So it was my and a few of my coworkers' opinions that Drufo was in fact carcinogenic, and a link between Drufo and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was brought up at a research meeting.
And how was that information received?
All that was said about the information was that they would keep it in the company until the final results of the study were published.
Did the official report published by the company mention anything about the potential connection to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
No, the connection between non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was not mentioned anywhere in the final report published.
What did the official report say about the research and development team's findings?
That the research and development team put in good work and it included all of our information, but it didn't include all the information we put in. It didn't show all the results we had gathered.
Did the official report accurately summarize your team's research?
No, it didn't. Like I said, it didn't include some of the results we'd brought forth.
Mr. Durst, why did you choose to leave Lush Fertilizer?
I left the company because after me and a few of my coworkers discussed our concerns with Drufo being carcinogenic, my reports on my work ethic suddenly started to drop.
And how did your job at Lush Fertilizer officially end?
I was forced out of the company in December of 2006.
Mr. Durst, is your testimony today motivated in any way by the pending lawsuit against you?
No, my testimony isn't motivated by the
Or
lawsuit.
speculation?
Overall.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, is your testimony today motivated by the circumstances under which you were forced out of Lush Fertilizer?
No, my testimony today is only to shed light on the fact of my opinions on Drufo and the fact that Lush Fertilizer was aware of them.
Thank you, Mr. Durst. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Counselor. All right, counsel, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead, sir.
Is it true that you would consider the entire Doncourt family to be the family you never had?
Yes, I did consider them to be family.
And Charles Doncourt was your best friend, correct?
Charles was, in fact, my best friend, yes.
And you said you didn't plan to work for Lush right out of college, correct?
Lush Fertilizer wasn't my initial job thought, no.
And you could not find a job before getting hired by Lush, correct?
I did not find a job before being hired by Lush, that is correct.
And is it true Terra's Greenery's development of its line of fertilizers and law enhancers? You oversee Terra's Greenery's development?
Yes, that is correct. As the head of research and development team, I do oversee the development.
And just to make sure, so you started as an intern on the research development team for Lush Fertilizer in 2003?
I did start as an intern at Lush in 2003, yes.
Quickly rising through the ranks, passing more experienced engineers without any prior experience in the profession?
Yes, I did pass them up because my work was a higher quality than them.
All right, now let's talk about Lush Fertilizer. However, you had assignments to help develop Drufo, correct?
That is correct. We tested the research of it.
Okay, let's move on. And you said the executive team of Lush Fertilizer team confronted you about your job performance, correct?
They did confront me about my job performance, but I assure you my work was still very good.
And even being put on probationary status within the company?
So I would like to bring up that the only time I was put on probationary status was after I represented my concerns about Drufo, right after the study was published. That was when my work suddenly dropped.
However, yeah, you said that a few months later, your performance was abysmal, correct?
Yes, they said that.
And after speaking with Blake, you started looking for a job rather being forced out of Lush Fertilizer, correct?
I started looking for a job because I knew Lush was forcing me out.
Finding a position at Terra's Greenery as a competitor to Lush Fertilizer in 2006, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And then can you refer to Exhibit 5 for me, please?
Exhibit 5, yes. Okay.
Never mind, Your Honor. That's all the questions I have for today.
All right, thank you, counsel. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed? Again, Mr. Durst, why did you choose to leave Lush Fertilizer?
Like I said, I left Lush because my performance reviews started to suddenly drop only after I expressed my concerns about Drufo being carcinogenic.
And why do you believe your performance was considered subpar?
I believe it was because I brought up my concerns about Drufo being carcinogenic.
Could you again tell me what kinds of tests you performed at Lush Fertilizer?
We tested the chemicals and stuff inside of the fertilizers, the safety of it.
Would Lush publish this information in its final report?
No, all of our concerns about Drufo being carcinogenic was not published in the final report.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Counselor. Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
This witness is excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Counselor, any further witnesses?
The plaintiff calls Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Can you please state your name for the jury?
My name is Dr. Casey Rogers, spelled CaseyRogers.
And what is your occupation, Dr. Rogers?
I'm currently employed as a professor in the Agriculture and Entomology Department at the University of California at Berkeley.
Can you briefly describe your educational background?
I had received my Bachelor of Science in Agriculture and Chemistry from Colorado State University and my PhD in Agriculture and Entomology from the University of California at Berkeley.
And are you currently teaching any courses at UC Berkeley?
I am. I teach 3 classes right now, a 101 class called Intro to Horticulture Entomology, a 201 class called Food Crops, which focuses on the history and development of the primary crops that feed the U.S. currently, and an advanced 301 class called Herbicide Selectivity in Action, which focuses on the biochemical effects of herbicides on our crops.
And have you focused your research on any particular subject?
Yes, at the university, I conduct research in the Environmental Chemistry and Toxicology Lab, where I focus on pesticide mode of action and metabolism by the human body. And I've also been studying the potentially harmful effects prolonged exposure to chemicals has on the body for many years. And more recently, the majority of that research has been focused on the harmful effects of Drufo.
Permission to share a screen for Exhibit 6.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Permission granted.
Hold on. Having technical difficulties. Dr. Rogers, do you recognize Exhibit 6?
Yes, Exhibit 6 is a copy of my CV.
And do you recognize Exhibit 7?
Yes, it is a list of the research publications over the years of my
Does your
research.
CV, excuse me, I apologize. Does your CV accurately set forth your professional work background?
It does.
Does Exhibit 7 accurately and completely published? Does Exhibit 7 accurately and completely list your published work?
In its entirety, yes.
Your Honor, we'd like to offer Exhibit 6 and 7 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 6 and Exhibit 7 will be admitted.
Permission to publish into the jury?
So granted.
Dr. Rogers, have you published any articles about Drufo?
I have. So as you can see in Exhibit 7, that in 2017, I published an article in Biotech Information titled Drufo Toxicity and Carcinogenity, a review of the scientific basis of the European Union assessment. And more recently, in 2019, the Environmentalist published my article titled The Evidence of Human Exposure to Drufo, a review.
At this time, we would like to offer Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert in the field of agricultural pesticides, including the human metabolism of pesticides.
Counselor, any objection to that qualification?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
You're an expert in horticulture and entomology, correct?
That is true, yes.
You currently teach an introductory course of horticulture and entomology as well as food crops, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you please define horticulture for the court?
So horticulture is basically how do I explain this? I'm sorry. So it is the art or practice of garden cultivation and management.
And what is the study of etymology?
Etymology is so it is like a branch of zoology concerned with the study of insects.
So horticulture etymology is the study of garden management on insects, correct?
That is true. Yes.
Are all of your research publications listed in Exhibit 7?
In their entirety. Yes.
So you have a total of 6 published pieces, correct?
I believe that is correct. Yes.
You focus on the long-term health effects of prolonged exposure to potentially harmful substances, and you apply that knowledge to humans, correct?
Yes.
You put together a study on Drufo, correct?
Yes.
And you compare this to a control group with farm laborers and gardeners, correct?
Mm-hmm. Three separate groups. Yes.
You intended to compare this alleged study of farmers and gardeners to Mr. Weir's situation, correct?
I did.
And you saw his medical records?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
And you saw Mr. Weir's medical records?
Yeah, I'm aware of his medical records, yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to oppose the admission of Casey Rogers as an expert witness in this field of horticulture and entomology, as it's not specific to Mr. Weir's case, and it's more about focusing on the insects and the plants and not the human body. And I think it's very prevalent and specific to kind of analyze that towards her as it's her specific situation.
Right. Counselor, thank you for that record. Based on the witness's qualifications and experience, the witness will be qualified as an expert witness as outlined by counsel. You may continue.
Dr. Rogers, are you being paid for your work on this case?
Yes, I received nominal compensation on an hourly basis for my time in court today and for the time I spent reviewing records and pertinent scientific literature to reach my opinions in this case.
Has this compensation influenced your opinions in any way?
Absolutely not. I'm here to give the jury my opinions based solely on my scientific research and my education, training, and experience, nothing else. I'm only being compensated for time I'm taken away from my academic pursuits, nothing more.
So, Dr. Rogers, why did you decide to research the effects of Drufo?
Drufo first caught my attention when it came to the market because I believed it was rushed to the market without sufficient studies on its safety to humans because, I mean, the scientific community already knew that Drufo was carcinogenic in rats, and for many years after Drufo was released on the market, I heard reports on the potentially negative effects of the substance, and I wanted to study the chemical to determine any side effects or negative effects it could have. So I thought it was important to conduct my own study to see if there were any adverse health effects in persons who were exposed to Drufo over long periods of time.
And how did you conduct your study?
So my study included a control group of people who had never been exposed to Drufo, a group of people who used products containing Drufo on occasion, and a group of people who were exposed to Drufo on a regular, almost daily basis, such as professional farmers and gardeners. And the study then monitored the groups over a period of years, and the groups who had exposure to Drufo were monitored for various health conditions and then compared to that control group.
And what's the study find?
Specifically, the study found that those with prolonged exposure were 10 times more likely to be diagnosed with cancer as those without exposure, suggesting a strong correlation between exposure to Drufo and cancer.
And what did you do with these research findings?
With those research findings, as part of the study, I examined ways to mitigate and prevent exposure to Drufo and measured both the amount of the chemical that was absorbed by the skin and the amount that ended up in the respiratory system. And from that study, it was clear that those exposed to Drufo were primarily exposed by breathing in the aerosolized product, but they were also exposed through contact with the skin. And based on my findings, I made recommendations for steps that should be taken to reduce exposure and related risks.
Dr. Rogers, have you come to an opinion about whether Drufo causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
The witness may respond. He has been endorsed as an expert witness. Go ahead.
Okay.
The witness may answer.
Thank you.
Oh. Dr. Rogers, have you come to an opinion about whether Drufo causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
It is my opinion to a high degree of scientific probability that Mr. Ware's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was caused by prolonged exposure to Drufo. Yes.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
This is the first time that you have testified as an expert witness in court, correct?
It is.
It is known that Drufo is carcinogenic in rats, correct?
It is carcinogenic in rats. Yes.
It's not known without a shadow of a doubt that it's carcinogenic in humans, correct?
No other studies have come out showing the carcinogenity in humans. No.
You conducted your own study to see if there were any adverse health effects in persons who were exposed to Drufo over long periods of time, correct?
Yes.
In your study, your control group was individuals who had never been exposed to Drufo, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you compared that to farm laborers, correct?
Yes.
As well as gardeners, correct?
Yep. Yes.
Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma weakens the immune system, specifically the lymph system, correct?
Yes.
Lymphoma can start in any area of the body containing lymph tissue, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And then, sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah. No.
And then, and then it can spread to the rest of the body, correct?
Yes.
Non-Hodgkin lymphoma is not genetic, correct?
It's not genetic. No.
It can be caused by exposure to an environmental condition, correct?
Yeah. Any environmental condition, either breathing in or exposure through the skin,
Including pesticides, correct?
including pesticides.
The toxins in the pesticides can be absorbed through the skin, correct?
Yes.
Or inhaled through the respiratory system.
Yeah. And the aerosolized product. Yes.
In your study, you claimed that those exposed to Drufo were primarily exposed by breathing in the chemical, correct?
Primarily exposed. Yes.
As well as making skin contact with the chemical.
Yes.
You reviewed Miss Weir's medical records, correct?
I have. Yes.
And the scale bacteria that entered her tissue between her skin tissue, correct?
Yes.
As well as her lung tissue.
Yes.
And then this damaged her cells, correct?
It did damage his cells. Yes.
These damaged cells accumulated in his lymph nodes, correct?
Yes.
Overwhelming the immune function of these cells, correct?
Yes.
Which caused cancerous masses, correct?
Yep. Cancer was all over his body. Yes.
So you made recommendations for anyone who worked with Drufo, correct?
I did make those recommendations. Yes.
And you advised wearing long pants to protect their skin, correct?
Yes.
And long sleeves,
Long sleeves as well.
as well as wearing a medical grade protective mask, correct?
An N95 medical grade mask, as I recall. Yes.
And the results of your study were inconclusive, correct?
Inconclusive. Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Counselor. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead, sir.
Dr. Rogers, you were asked a number of questions in your cross-examination about recommendations on wearing protective clothing. Do you remember these questions?
I do. Yes.
And when were these recommendations made?
These recommendations were made a year before Dakota had left his fertilization company, meaning Dakota could not have had proper time to heed my warning as a doctor.
And Dr. Rogers, I ask one final time, has this compensation here today influenced your opinion in any way?
In no way has the compensation I've received in court today influenced my opinion in any way. It has solely been compensation that has been used, that has been given because of the time I'm taking away from my academic pursuits.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any recross?
Mr. Rogers, nevertheless, besides hearing this, besides having come to these conclusions a year later about protective clothing, you still agree with them and believe that they are necessary and proper in your expert opinion, correct?
Those recommendations are surely necessary. Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Counsel. Any further witnesses?
No further witnesses. Thank you.
Counsel for creation?
Sorry, could you please repeat that?
Is the defendants prepared to proceed with their case?
Yes.
Please call your first witness.
The defense calls Blake Doncourt to the stand.
Thank you. All right,
Ma'am,
counsel,
can you
your
please-
witness.
Ma'am, can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Hello, my name is Blake Duncourt. That's Duncourt spelled Doncourt.
Miss Doncourt, what is your profession?
I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Lush Fertilizer.
Could you please briefly describe your history with Lush Fertilizer?
Yes, starting in 2000, I grew this company to one of the world's largest suppliers of yard and commercial fertilizers. I worked day and night to make Lush the profitable company that it is today, after years of research, development, and expenditure of significant capital.
Who buys Lush Fertilizer?
Lush Fertilizer is used by businesses, governments, and individuals to produce vibrant, lush, and green grass, which our customers proudly show off.
Can you please share an example of your company's achievements?
Of course, our company has been profitable enough to direct 10% of our annual earnings to charities. In return, these charities are working hard to decrease the world's global nitrogen footprint. Additionally, in 2019, Lush was one of the recipients of the prestigious SEAL Business Sustainability Awards.
How has this work aided the environmental movement?
Well, our company has been instrumental in creating state and national legislation to further educate on environmental issues worldwide. And we've started our own charity focusing on cleaning the most polluted areas of the world's oceans.
Have you had personal success due to your dedication?
I've received many awards for my humanitarian work and my work with these charities and other environmental causes. I was personally nominated for the United Nations Champions of the Earth Award in 2020.
Can you please describe the accusations that have put you with us in court today?
Lush and I are being falsely accused of ignoring a known carcinogen in our fertilizer. Casey Rogers asserted that Drufo, a bonding agent in our fertilizer, is linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Have any specific risks been identified?
Our extensive research and testing before putting our product on the market did not identify this, the specific risks of persons coming into contact with the fertilizer.
Has there been any research on Drufo within your company?
Well, as Devin Williams will tell you, our toxicology research and development team found nothing in this product, nor apparently did the EPA.
Have any other studies in your company come up, including Drufo?
Carson Durst, a former employee, claims to have done such a study after a supposed company email was sent out. However, when we turned over our email system to the plaintiff's lawyers, our computers did not have that email.
Your Honor, permission to reference Exhibit 4?
Any objection, Counselor?
No objections, Your Honor.
Permission granted.
Can you identify Exhibit 4?
Yes, I can identify Exhibit 4.
What do you recognize the exhibit to be?
It looks like the email Carson manufactured about the risks of Drufo.
Is this a fair and accurate copy of what you remember it to be?
No, I never received this email. In fact, Lush's researchers have reached opposite conclusions to those that Carson is now trying to assert.
When were you first aware of these concerns?
Well, Carson had every opportunity to bring them to Lush's attention or mine personally. It was his job to look for dangers so that we could follow up on them. But these concerns never came up until Carson was fired and started working for our competitor, Terrace Greenery.
Your Honor, permission to share Exhibit 5.
Any objection, Counselor?
No objections, Your Honor.
You may share.
Miss Doncourt, can you identify Exhibit 5?
Yes, I can identify Exhibit 5.
What do you identify the exhibit to be?
It's an ironclad non-disclosure agreement with Carson Durst to not disclose or tell anyone about the nature of our research and development in fertilizer and related products.
How do you recognize Exhibit 5?
This is the operative provision of the non-disclosure agreement Mr. Durst and I signed prior to his employment at Lush Fertilizer.
Is this a fair and accurate copy of what you remember it to be?
Yes.
Your Honor, I now ask to admit this exhibit into evidence.
Any objection, Counselor?
No objections, Your Honor.
That
Can
exhibit.
you please?
Thank you.
Can you please read the first sentence of Section 1 of your non-compete agreement with Mr. Durst?
During employment and for a period of 2 years after the separation of employment for any reason, the employee will not directly or indirectly engage in any competitive business and shall not become directly or indirectly engaged in any business that would benefit from the disclosure of Lush's trade secrets.
Does Lush Fertilizer have any competitors?
Terrace Greenery. And now they're about to release a product similar to our fertilizer, but which they claim is safer and carcinogen.
Can you please read the first sentence of Section 6, injection, aloud for us?
It is agreed that if the employee violates the terms of this agreement, irreparable harm will occur and money damages will be insufficient to compensate Lush.
Why didn't Lush publish their financial findings?
Well, this type of proprietary information is never shared in public. It would give our company's competitors an advantage.
Your Honor, now I ask permission to show the opposing counsel Exhibit 8.
So granted.
Ms. Doncourt, can you identify Exhibit 8?
Yes, I can identify Exhibit 8.
What do you recognize the exhibit to be?
It's an amortization table.
How do you recognize Exhibit 8?
I created it in 2004 to track finances for Lush.
Is this a fair and accurate copy of what you remember it to be?
Yes.
Your Honor, I now ask to admit this exhibit into evidence.
Any objection, Counselor?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Exhibit 8 will be so admitted.
Financially, what are the benefits of not baking the fertilizer?
As shown in Exhibit 8, we could increase our profits by 6% in the first year and 2% annually thereafter if Lush does not bake their fertilizer.
Where does this extra money go?
In 2004, Lush used these earnings to pay back our investors for our seed funds.
What was your intention in the creation of this product?
By baking our fertilizer, only a little risk is alleviated. Consequently, we did not think it was necessary, nor did federal or state laws.
Is there anything you would like to say to Mr. Weirs?
I do feel terrible that Dakota Weirs has known Hodgkin lymphoma, a terrible disease. Thankfully, it appears Dakota's diagnosis was early, and with treatment, the prognosis for recovery is very good. I'm hopeful Dakota's recovery is swift.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Counselor. Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Ms. Doncourt, you are the Chief Executive Officer of Lush Fertilizer, correct? You guys are still muted.
Yes, that is correct.
And you have been the CEO of Lush Fertilizer since 2000?
Yes, I founded the company in 2000.
When you took over as CEO, Lush Fertilizer was an unknown producer of fertilizers, right?
That is correct.
And Lush Fertilizer is now one of the world's largest supplier of yard and commercial fertilizers?
Yes.
And you work day and night to make Lush Fertilizer the profitable company that it is today?
That is correct.
You make more than enough money as Lush Fertilizer CEO to take care of yourself, right?
I would say.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Overruled. The witness can answer.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Doncourt, you make more than enough money as Lush Fertilizer CEO to take care of yourself, right?
I pride myself on how well our company does. That is correct.
And do you make more than enough money to take care of your new spouse as well?
I would prefer that we do not go into my financial.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Counsel, response?
Your Honor, I'm asking this question so that I may continue to ask questions about the financial part of Lush Fertilizer and how they, and leading into how they very well could have baked their fertilizer to avoid any complications.
Overruled. You may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, Ms. Doncourt, you make more than enough money to take care of your new spouse, correct?
Yes, however, I would prefer we do not delve into my personal finances at the time. I'm sure Dakota would appreciate that as well, as we're here for her.
All right. I'd like to talk to you about Lush Fertilizer's decision not to bake any of its products. You'd agree that baking the fertilizer removes any risk that the fertilizer is carcinogenic?
While baking the fertilizer would remove any risk, the risk it alleviated was so little that it was simply overkill.
So although baking the fertilizer removes any risk of its carcinogenity, you decided not to bake any of Lush Fertilizer's products, right?
I was never shown any verifiable evidence to confirm that it would remove.
Was that a yes or a no to my question?
That's a yes.
So besides it not being necessary, isn't it true that you decided not to bake Lush Fertilizer as a cost-saving measure?
While baking the fertilizer would alleviate a small risk, it was not profitable for us at the time.
Was that a yes or no to my question?
Yes.
So you decided not to bake any of Lush Fertilizer's products because you thought it was too costly?
Yes, that is true.
Permission to show Exhibit 8 on the screen.
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Doncourt, do you recognize this document as Lush Fertilizer's anticipated profits from 2004 to 2014?
Yes.
And you created this document as your role as a CEO.
Yes, that is correct.
Is Exhibit 8 again a fair and accurate version of Lush Fertilizer's anticipated profits from 2004 to 2014?
Yes.
You created this table to determine what the cost would be of baking Lush Fertilizer's products, right?
That is true.
And the third column shows Lush Fertilizer's net profits after deducting the cost of baking.
Yes.
And by net profits, this means you're deducting the cost of doing business, such as expenses and salaries, and this is everything left over, right?
Yes, that is true.
Isn't it true then that according to your own projections, Lush Fertilizer still would have been profitable every year, even after baking its fertilizers?
Yes, that is true.
In fact, you estimated that Lush Fertilizer would still make over $1 million in profits every year from 2004 to 2014, even if it chose to bake its fertilizer.
Yes, that is correct.
But this wasn't enough profit for you, was it?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Overruled. The witness should answer.
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, Ms. Doncourt, this wasn't enough profit for you, was it?
Well, I pride myself on the safety of our company. Baking alleviated only a little bit of a risk, and it was not financially equitable for us at the time.
So is this a yes or no to my question?
That is a yes to your question.
Thank you. Ms. Doncourt, you thought that removing any risk that your fertilizer was carcinogenic was simply overkill.
Yes.
But you never published these financial findings to the public, did you?
No, what company publishes this type of proprietary findings?
Ms. Doncourt, I'm not asking about other companies. I'm asking if your own company published these financial findings to the public.
We do not.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Counselor. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Doncourt, you started this company in 2004, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You founded this company from the very beginning, correct?
Yes.
And there was no federal or state law objections towards not baking your fertilizer, correct?
No, nor did any research turn up to prove otherwise.
How about from the EPA?
The EPA concluded that there was no risk.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. This witness is excused. Counsel, your next witness.
Your Honor, I'd like to call up Skylar Weirs to the stand.
Go ahead.
Could you state your name and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Skylar Weirs, and that's W-E-I-R-S.
And can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm an investigative journalist, and I've written lots of important articles on the issues between individual health and corporate policy. I'm the twin sibling of Dakota Weirs.
And what are some things you do as an investigative journalist?
My profession and the magazine I write for is devoted to promoting scientific skepticism, and we have experience writing several prominent articles on the conflict between health and corporate policy. Coincidentally, before Dakota was diagnosed with cancer, I published an article in the Rationalist magazine questioning the narrative of the casual link between Drufo and cancer.
And how did you get into writing about agriculture and agritech?
Well, I was actually picked by my editor to write a series on modern agritech. Drufo being part of that series, I write for that magazine company called Rationalist, a nonprofit organization that specifically challenges the spread of pseudoscience, superstition, and irrational beliefs, largely looking at commercial agriculture and GMOs.
And how long did you research Drufo for?
I spent about a year researching all the information I could.
And how did you go about your research for Drufo?
I began by looking at publications that were put out by lots of different agritech companies, and then I delved deeper by looking at the research studies that were in those publications.
Did you have any official or credible sources that stood out to you?
Yes, I did. Actually, I came across most of my research tracking down and reviewing data from the United States Department of Agriculture, or USDA, and the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, or NASDA.
And I just want to create a basis of your credibility. Do you have a college degree?
No, I do not have a college degree, but I also don't need one to gather this research. In fact, apart from the big organizations of USDA and NASDA, I highly doubt that anyone is able to pull the level of modern agritech perspectives that I have, since I spent a year devoting my life to all of this research.
At this time, Your Honor, I'd like to tender this witness as an expert within the field of agritech research. Under the rule of evidence of 702, an expert witness is not required to hold a specific degree, training certificate, accreditation, or a membership in a professional organization. As an investigative journalist, Ms. Weir is qualified by her experience regarding the several publications under the Rational Society that reinforce her knowledge in agritech research and has devoted her time researching credible publications dealing with Drufo. I would like to tender the witness her voir dire and qualifications.
Any objection, Counselor?
Yes, Your Honor, we stand by our objections made in our motion in limine briefing, and we do not believe the knowledge acquired by Ms. Weirs is the knowledge contemplated by Rule 702, as there is no way to verify the reliability of that research.
Thank you, Counselor. Pursuant to 702, this witness will be so qualified as an expert witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. How do GMOs affect lush fertilizer?
We frequently publish articles on lush fertilizer, which happens to be the target of the pseudoscientific mass hysteria due to their use of Drufo that challenges the business of the older sectors of agritech.
And can you support lush fertilizer?
Yes, Lush Fertilizer actually donates 10% of their annual profits to reducing nitrogen contamination in groundwater agricultural communities. It's clear to me that Lush Fertilizer is committed to reducing the impact of nitrogen fertilizer on the environment too. It's really a mission I truly believe in.
All right, let's
Objection,
switch gears.
speculation on the part of the witness.
I'm sorry, Counselor, what was the objection?
Actually, speculation on the part of the witness. Ms. Weirs is not qualified to speak to Lush Fertilizer's workings as a business.
Response, Counselor?
Your Honor, this is an expert which is in agritech, which lush fertilizer falls under the aspects of agritech under all those fields of research.
The objection's overruled. This witness may answer.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about misinformation campaigns. How do misinformation campaigns in the market begin?
It comes down to domination in the market. Monopolies scare competitors in any industry. There was one instance when Monsanto, an agricultural company, tried to monopolize the maize seed genomics and herbicides industry. That would have generated $15 billion in revenue and $8 billion in gross profits each year. However, their competitors launched a massive PR campaign to destroy their reputation.
And what have companies like Monsanto have done for agritech?
A recent review of about 150 research studies concluded that GMO tech has increased crop yields over the last 20 years. This is extremely beneficial considering that roughly 800 million people suffer from malnutrition and die from diseases such as chronic HIV, AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis.
And can you tell me a little bit about what these GMOs are?
Basically, they're genetically modified organisms that help increase crop yields and nutritional value. For example, GM soybeans, corn, and cotton were associated with a 22% overall increase in yield and a 37% decrease in pesticide use. Obviously, this is a huge thing that would greatly benefit all the people in the agricultural industry.
And what have been some causes of these misinformation campaigns?
From what I know, struggling farmers in regions like sub-Saharan Africa and India are hesitant to adopt GM crops because of their campaign's influence. Because of this, there have been several anti-GMO campaigns.
And what other ways are GM crops useful to the agricultural sector?
A recent study actually shows that farmers can reoccupy more than 153 million acres of irrigated land that cannot be used by basic crops because of high salt concentration. To put it in perspective, 153 million acres is about the size of France.
And would you say that modern agricultural products are the safest possible option in the market?
Obviously, I know that everything has risks, especially when it comes to the agriculture market. Pesticides and herbicides are literally defined as poisons and are meant to kill organisms that farmers don't want in their farms. Every commercial pesticide has carcinogens like nitrates, glyphosate, and arsenic.
And do modern pesticides have these carcinogens?
I want to emphasize the fact that everything in the agricultural market has its risk. Modern pesticides do have carcinogens, but they're so much safer than what they used to be.
What about other agricultural products like grass seeds, for example?
All modern grass seed products have herbicides like 2,4-D that preserve grass but kill weeds.
What type of weeds are most common in the grass?
Clover weeds.
And how are clover weeds bad for the environment?
Clover weeds pull nitrogen out of the air, storing it in the soil. Without the nitrogen that can be provided by plants in the natural conditions, the soil is not fit for grass that would grow on lawns. These companies attempted to fix this by switching depleted nitrogen with synthetic nitrogen, making it a soluble substance.
And is the nitrogen better in the soluble state?
Not at all, actually. The nitrogen then soaks deep into the soil after a rainstorm or irrigation, which reaches groundwater and eventually nearby wells.
And how does that apply to Drufo?
Drufo is an incredibly effective bonding agent, which means that a significantly smaller amount of fertilizer and pesticides are used, meaning it's less likely to contaminate the groundwater and its waterways.
And how often would you need to apply Drufo for the desired effect?
You only need to apply Drufo once or twice a year, whereas other fertilizers have to be applied 5 to 6 times. Because it's an effective pesticide, it does not require the use of pesticides like glyphosate and arsenic.
And what is the importance of fertilizers like glyphosate and arsenic?
Glyphosate and arsenic have been linked as carcinogen in humans, reported from the International Agency for Research on Cancer.
Through your research, is lush fertilizer safe?
From my research, I found that glyphosate and arsenic are the only carcinogen for humans.
And could you tell me what this means?
It means that there are no research that I have found to support a link between Drufo and carcinogens.
All right, I just want to get into your relationship with you and your sibling. How's your relationship?
Well, Dakota and I don't have the stereotypical close twin relationship. We're still family.
And how does your family support you in your work?
I actually chose to forego college for my writing, and so I have to work at Applebee's as a server just to make ends meet, to my family's dismay.
And does your family help you financially?
Well, I'm admittedly a bit of a gambler, sports betting. A March Madness a few years back really put me in a hole I'm still not out of. My parents were helping me on the side before my mom died, but that was all my mom's doing until my dad coming up.
And why do you not support your brother and your brother?
I just want to emphasize again that I started this research before Dakota was diagnosed. I stand by my research because I know it's the right thing to do. Drufo could be a game changer in agriculture as a safe alternative to currently used agricultural fertilizers and pesticides.
That is all the questions I have for today.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor, any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
May I proceed? Good afternoon, Ms. Weirs.
Good afternoon, Ms. Weirs.
You consider yourself an
investigative journalist? Yes.
And you haven't just written about modern agriculture, have you?
No, I have not.
You've also written about UFOs?
Yes, well, the research I write about has to do with scientific skepticism. So I look into the mass hysteria in the market, and I write about the things that I believe are being overused.
So is that a yes, Ms. Weirs?
Yeah.
And you've also written about flat earth theory?
I have.
And you've written about anti-vax culture?
I have.
And you were here for the testimony of the plaintiff's expert, Dr. Casey Rogers, correct?
Yes.
So you understand that Dr. Rogers has a PhD in agriculture from the University of California at Berkeley, as well as a Bachelor in Science in Agriculture and Chemistry from Colorado State University, correct?
I do.
And you understand that Dr. Rogers teaches courses in herbicide selectivity and action at University of California at Berkeley, correct?
Yeah.
Whereas you don't have a PhD in agriculture, do you?
No, I don't.
Nor do you have a PhD in agricultural technology.
No, I do not.
So you don't have a PhD in any subject?
No, I do not. I chose to forego college for my writing career.
So you don't teach any courses in agriculture or otherwise?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. We already established that she's an expert within the field. That she does not need to be questioned for credibility.
Response, Counselor.
Your Honor, I am asking to lay a foundation for this witness's precedence as a in the field of agritech.
Overall, what's going to answer?
So, Ms. Weirs, you don't teach any courses in agriculture or otherwise?
No, I don't.
Nor do you have a master's degree in agriculture or agricultural technology?
No, I do not.
And you don't have a bachelor's degree in any of those subjects?
No, I don't. I've previously answered that I didn't have a college degree.
So your opinions on agricultural technology are based solely on your work as a journalist?
Yes, I took a whole year out of my life to dedicate it to my research.
So your opinions are based solely on the 1 year you spent researching Drufo as a journalist?
Yes, but I had more time than other people do to spend that time on the research.
That's a yes, Ms. Weirs?
Yeah.
So you believe the jury should give more weight to your opinions than to Dr. Rogers, correct?
Yes, since I took time to formulate that research. And if I remember correctly, Dr. Rogers' study was inconclusive.
Is that a yes, Ms. Weirs?
Yeah, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect?
No redirects, Your Honor.
All right, this witness is excused. All right, counsel,
Your Honor, I would like to call Dr. Devin Williams to the stand.
Go ahead.
Could you state your name and spell out your last name for the record, please?
My name is Dr. Devin Williams, Williams.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I have led the toxicology research and development labs at Lush Fertilizer for the past 7 years and have been with Lush Fertilizer for the past 10 years.
Have you worked anywhere else?
I started my career performing methods of forensic toxicological analysis of human samples at the Larimer County Office of Chief Medical Examiner Toxicologist in Fort Collins. I was also an assistant professor at Danvers CU Anschutz for toxicology and a visiting associate professor at Colorado State University.
What form of education did you receive in order to get these jobs?
I got my PhD in pharmacology and toxicology specialization from Colorado State University in Fort Collins, and I also did a specialized post-PhD program in pharmacotoxicology at the University of Utah.
Your Honor, I request to show Exhibit 9 to the witness.
Go ahead.
I now show you what has been marked for identification as Exhibit 9. Would you identify it, please?
This is my curriculum vitae, and I recognize it as my personal and professional achievements.
Your Honor, at this time, I move the admission of Exhibit 9 as Dr. Devin Williams' curriculum vitae.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, so admitted.
Your Honor, permission to publish Exhibit 9 to the jury?
Permission granted.
What conclusions have you drawn from your previous education and work experience?
I understand how to research and evaluate test results to determine the fate and effects of potentially toxic chemical agents, essentially meaning I know how to tell if a substance is going to harm the average human and how to neutralize it.
Your Honor, the defense requests to move Dr. Devin Williams as an expert witness in the field of toxicology.
Any objection, counselor?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right. This witness will testify as an expert.
What was your original job with Lush Fertilizer?
I was originally assigned to fill in as a technician for timeliness in fertilizer development because 50% of the development team had recently left.
How did you become the lead of the toxicology research and development labs?
I was promoted 3 years after signing on as a technician to lead the labs and to largely oversee work on the environmental impacts of fertilizers.
What does this job entail?
I'm a toxicologist by training and work to understand how biological systems respond to environmental interventions. And currently I'm overseeing the production of Drufo, a fertilizer in our company.
Can you describe what fertilizers do?
Fertilizers enhance the growth of plants in 2 ways, either by adding nutrients or by enhancing the effectiveness of soil by modifying its water retention and aeration, both of which affect environmental balances.
How have fertilizers come to be?
Well, once the Green Revolution took hold, agricultural production increased by 800% in some areas between 1960 and 2000 due to a change in nitrogen fixing chemical processes, changing from single nutrient fertilizers to macro and micronutrient fertilizers.
How did the increased use of fertilizers lead to environmental effects?
Well, as we came into the current century, a problem known as eutrophication occurred.
How does eutrophication affect the environment?
Essentially, eutrophication is a buildup of excessive nutrients in bodies of water caused by agricultural runoffs. Basically, the extra nitrogen that fails to bind with the soil is carried to bodies of water, leading to dense algae blooms that kill marine life. It's also important to note that these algae blooms harbor bacteria harmful to humans.
And how are you using your expert knowledge to mitigate fertilizers' environmental impact?
Currently, as the head of toxicology research and development labs at Lush Fertilizer, we are building a fertilizer known as Drufo that is better for the environment.
Do you have somebody that oversees your operations?
Yes, when I first began working, CEO Blake Doncourt requested for me to keep Drufo industry-leading, environmentally aware, and cost-effective. I'm determined to meet these goals.
Do you believe in these goals?
Yes, I see myself as having a responsibility to consider why things work and if they will affect the environment rather than just focusing on project standards.
How is Drufo different from other fertilizers?
Drufo enhances the fertilizer's ability to bind nitrogen to the soil. And as we discussed above, other fertilizers lack that same ability.
In simple terms, what does this mean?
In simple terms, this means that less fertilizers needs to be sprayed, less nitrates are washed away into the soil. In turn, less marine life is harmed, and there's a less chance of humans also being harmed. Essentially, Drufo is a revolutionary product that is far better for the planet than previous fertilizers.
And why is Drufo banned within the EU?
The European Union's nitrate directive will not allow any fertilizers that produce a surplus amount of nitrates during lab tests. When the right bacteria are added, a surplus of nitrates are created, but these bacteria are far more different than what is found in nature.
What does this mean?
Essentially, if you put Drufo in a petri dish with the right bacteria, you will get the same amount of nitrates as a regular fertilizer.
Are there any studies on if Drufo causes any other bodily harm?
There are claims in studies that Drufo may cause cancer, but specifically non-Hodgkin lymphoma. These claims and studies have not been correlated with a statistically significant increase in the incidence of non-Hodgkin lymphoma or any other cancer.
Are there any specific studies that are referenced?
The only study that is even being discussed is Dr. Rogers' study, and that study is by no means valid.
Why is Dr. Rogers' study invalid?
There are millions of confounding variables that could have been given the subjects Drufo because Dr. Rogers' study did not set a control for his subjects, meaning we can't point to a single factor. Additionally, his study has not been peer-reviewed nor replicated.
Is the peer reviewing process important?
The peer reviewing process is extremely important as to remove bias from the study. Without the peer reviewing process, there is nothing proving that the experimenter did not sway from the results with confirmation bias.
Is the process of replicating the experiment important?
The process of replication is also extremely important because just performing a study one time shows nothing. It's like in science class, teachers were always made us to perform 3 trials because that's the only effective way of showing that the results are valid.
What makes you think Dr. Rogers did neither of those things?
I believe that Dr. Rogers did not have a study peer-reviewed or replicated because there's simply no evidence of it being done.
Based on your
objection, that question called for speculation.
Response, Counselor?
Your Honor, he has the reputation of an expert witness, which means he can actually make the assumption that the study has not been peer reviewed or replicated because Dr. Casey Rogers is probably very well known within the scientific community, so as well as our doctor.
Overall, the witness can answer.
What makes you think Dr. Rogers did neither of those things?
I believe that Dr. Rogers didn't have a study peer-reviewed nor replicated because there's simply no evidence of it being done.
Based on your expert opinion, does Drufo cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
My extensive valid research and lack of valid counter evidence points straight to the fact that Drufo does not cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and it is better for the overall environment than any other substitute.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's it.
Thank you, Counselor. Cross-examination.
May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning. Good afternoon, Dr. Williams. You work for Lush Fertilizer, correct?
Yes.
And they pay for your salary, true?
Yes.
And you've actually worked at Lush Fertilizer for nearly a decade, isn't that right?
Yes, for 10 years.
Dr. Williams, Lush Fertilizer does not use Drufo in all of its products, is that correct?
Yes.
Dr. Williams, Drufo is banned in France, isn't it?
Could you repeat the question?
Dr. Williams, Drufo is banned in France, isn't it?
Yes.
And in fact, Drufo isn't just banned in France, it's actually banned in the entire European Union. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
And with that being said, you are currently working on a study to submit to the EU so that they will reconsider the EU ban, right?
Correct.
Isn't it true that if this jury were to find that Drufo causes cancer, it would create a whole host of new bureaucratic roadblocks with the EU?
Yes, that is correct.
And in fact, that would prevent Lush Fertilizer from selling their products containing Drufo to a significant percentage of the global market, right?
That is correct, although we will still be able to sell our fertilizer not containing Drufo to a major part of the global market.
Dr. Williams, is this right?
Could you repeat the question?
Dr. Williams, is this correct? Is that still correct? That in
Yes.
fact that. So Dr. Williams, it's fair to say that you have a financial bias in the outcome of this case, true?
I do have a financial bias to my stance, but Dr. Rogers has a far greater financial bias.
I didn't ask about Dr. Rogers. I asked about you.
Yes.
Dr. Williams, you were here for the testimony of the plaintiff's expert, Dr. Casey Rogers, correct?
Yes.
And you understand that Dr. Rogers has a PhD in agriculture and etymology from the University of California at Berkeley and a Bachelor of Science in agriculture and chemistry from Colorado State University, right?
I do understand this.
And you understand that Dr. Rogers teaches courses in herbicide selectivity and action at University of California at Berkeley, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, relevancy.
Response, Counselor?
The defense opened the door to questions about Dr. Rogers. So you understand that Dr. Rogers teaches courses in herbicide selectivity and action at University of California at Berkeley, correct?
That is correct.
And you understand that Dr. Rogers does not work for Lush Fertilizer, yes?
That is correct.
But you do work for Lush Fertilizer, right?
I do work for Lush Fertilizers.
And yet you believe that this jury should give more weight to your opinions than to Dr. Rogers', correct?
That is correct.
Dr. Williams, one of your criticisms of Dr. Rogers' study is that it has not been replicated. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And as the lead of the toxicology research and development lab at Lush Fertilizer, you could have ordered the study to be replicated under the conditions you suggested. True?
I have, yes, that is correct. And to sell our Drufo products in the United States Department of Agriculture did have to review and replicate our experiments.
But you haven't ordered that study, have you?
In order to sell our products in the United States, we had to get our products reviewed and replicated by the United States Department of Agriculture. So although I did not order those studies to happen, we would be unable to sell our products within the United States without it being done.
It's very interesting, but I didn't ask for an explanation. I just asked if it was true.
Can you repeat the question?
But you haven't ordered that study, have you?
I have not.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge. As the head of the lab, we don't know necessarily whether or not if they worked at the same times, and that is not in his witness statement.
Response, Counselor.
What was the objection?
Repeat it, Mr. Thompson.
The objection was lack of personal knowledge, because at the time Casey Rogers worked, there was not we do not for sure at the time that Casey Rogers was working, Dr. Devin Williams was not the head of the lab.
I'm asking about Dr. Casey Rogers.
Can you repeat the question?
I was asking about Dr. Casey Rogers.
What about Dr. Casey Rogers are you asking about?
Never mind.
Your Honor. Counsel, what's your response to the objection?
Okay. It says that in his written statement testimony for Dr. Devlin Williams, at page 45, lines 112 and 113, that Dr. Devlin Williams could have ordered the study to be replicated under the conditions that he suggested, but he decided not to do so.
Overruled.
Dr. Williams, I want to talk about the testimony you haven't given today. Dr. Williams, today in this courtroom, you can't tell the jury definitely that Drufo does not cause cancer, true?
The chemical Drufo does not directly cause cancer.
And one more question, Dr. Williams. Who is your employer?
My employer is CEO Blake Doncourt.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor, redirect.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
We talked about the importance of doing a peer review and replication. It was brought into question your credibility with that fact. It is true that in order to release your product, your experiments have to be replicated, right? In order for Drufo to hit the American market, it had to be replicated, correct?
That is correct.
And it's also correct that EU was banned because there were too many nitrates, but because that it's not in the natural soil, which is also seen in there, right? The reason why that the only way we can see the runoff of eutrophication or the possibility of it is through natural soil, correct?
That is correct.
Which means we can't say for certain that the right bacteria were put in the experiment that the EU used, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Counselor. Recross.
Dr. Williams, may I proceed? May I proceed?
You may. Thank you.
Dr. Williams, under your recommendation, you have chosen not to replicate Dr. Casey Rogers' study. Is this true? Yes or no?
Yes.
No further questions.
All right. Thank you. This witness is excused. Any further witnesses?
No further witnesses, Your Honor.
Closing arguments, counsel?
I was confused by the question.
Mr. Honor, may I proceed?
You may.
Your Honor, members of the jury, today you have heard arguments from both the plaintiff and the defendant in an attempt to prove the liability of Lush Fertilizer. But at its heart, this case is about a high school kid whose dreams of becoming a world-class piano player at Juilliard were destroyed when he developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as a result of exposure to Lush Fertilizer. As the plaintiff, it was our job to prove that the defendant was negligent and caused Mr. Weir's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely true than not. We submit that we have met our burden. The judge will instruct you on the law, and we'd like to draw your attention to instructions 2 and 3, which state that we can prove to you that Lush was negligent either by failing to exercise reasonable care to make sure its product was safe, or by proving to you that Lush knew that its product was harmful and failed to adequately warn its consumers. We met our burden by calling 3 witnesses. First, you heard from my client, Dakota Weirs. Mr. Weirs has always gone above and beyond to make the lives of those around him better. He spends his free time volunteering at homeless shelters and participating in extracurricular activities, but what truly drives Mr. Weirs has always been his passion for piano. He has been playing since he was 7 years old, and he was so talented that he secured a full ride scholarship to Juilliard. But the debilitating illness he developed as a result of Lush's negligence has caused him constant pain and fatigue and makes it impossible for him to play the piano for more than a few minutes at a time. Mr. Weirs has had everything taken from him, all because he wanted to work a job to save for a future he may never get. Second, you heard from Carson Durst, who worked for years as a product development engineer on Lush's research and development team and was a first-hand witness to the immoral and unethical behavior exhibited by its highest-ranking executives. Tests performed by Mr. Durst's team revealed that Drufo could contain a carcinogen and could be linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but Lush did not see these risks as important enough to take any precautionary measures. Mr. Durst's testimony established that Lush knew about the risks of Drufo and continually ignored them to maximize its profits. Lastly, you heard from Dr. Casey Rogers, an expert in the field of agriculture, who has spent years working to understand the harmful effects of prolonged exposure to chemicals like Drufo. He also spoke to the devastating consequences of rushing a product to the market without first understanding the risks of its risks. Mr. Rogers' study was executed over the span of many years, and its results are clear. Using Lush fertilizer exponentially increases the risks of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. These witnesses alone established by a preponderance of the evidence that My Lush Fertilizer was negligent and is liable for my client's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Lush Fertilizer also called 3 witnesses today, none of whom provided a plausible defense for the company's actions or could justify why they did not bake its fertilizer or why they did not include a proper warning label. You heard first from Blake Doncourt, who testified that Lush made a conscious decision not to bake its fertilizer. You saw Exhibit 8, which showed that Lush still would have made over $1 million in profits each year, even if it had baked its fertilizer to remove any risk that it was carcinogenic. You heard from Mr. Doncourt that Lush refused to ensure the safety of its consumers by baking its products because doing so would have been simply overkill. Second, you heard from Skylar Weirs, whose testimony was baseless at best and dangerously unreliable at worst. Ms. Weirs spoke in front of you today with the same expertise in agritech that she has in the other topics she's devoted her time to, such as flat earth theory. How can Skylar claim to be a supposed expert in the field of agritech when she is she has provided no relevant credentials and we cannot verify the validity of her research? Lastly, you heard from Dr. Devin Williams, who explicitly admitted that he has a financial bias in the outcome of this case. He could not tell you that Drufa was not carcinogenic because he does not know that to be true himself. Dr. Williams' entire testimony today was a cop-out, an avoidance of the question at hand. It is clear that all of the defense witnesses testified in the name of profiteering off of a company that continues to exploit its consumers, but their testimonies did nothing to dismantle the ironclad proof the Lush Fertilizer was negligent and is liable for my client's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and should have included a proper warning on its label. We have met our burden and we ask you to find Lush Fertilizer negligent. You will now hear from the defense. Listen closely and pay attention to whether Lush's attorney answers any of our unresolved questions or takes any responsibility for its actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, for the defense, closing arguments.
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Perry, and I am a defense lawyer in this case, alongside my co-counsel Ryan Pack and Edward Thompson. In the case the prosecution has presented to you today, there is insufficient proof to convict Lush Fertilizer of this crime. In this case, the plaintiff is tasked to prove 4 statements. First, they must prove that Lush Fertilizer manufactured a product containing Drufa. Second, they must prove that Lush Fertilizer was negligent by failing to exercise reasonable care in order to prevent any unreasonable risk or harm to their product users. Third, that Dakota is a reasonably expected person Lush should have expected to use their product. And finally, that Dakota had damages that were caused by Lush's negligence. The words reasonable and expectation are emphasized. If you find that even one of these 4 statements has not been proven, then your verdict is not guilty. First, I would like to discuss the relationship between Carson Durst and Blake Doncourt. There are only a few concrete facts in this relationship, which I will outline for you. Evidently, Carson Durst broke his ironclad non-disclosure agreement. Mr. Durst did not wait the full 2-year period after leaving Lush Fertilizer as outlined in Section 1 of the contract. Instead, he waited 6 months until he was employed at Terrace Greenery. By doing this, he directly engaged in another competitive business that would benefit from disclosure of Lush's trade secrets. Mr. Durst went against his word as he had previously signed this contract. When would he start following and valuing his word? Not expected, not reasonable. Furthermore, Ms. Doncourt has been accused of monetary motivation for not baking Lush Fertilizer. Only a little risk would be alleviated from baking the fertilizer, a fact corroborated by federal and state law, the EPA, and the Toxicology and Research Development Team, counting on expectation and reason. Next, I would like to address Dr. Casey Rogers. This study was inconclusive. Additionally, the manner in which the study was conducted was not accurate. Landscapers are not farmers nor gardeners. Different lifestyles put people into different environments, thus creating different exposures. It's an injustice to Mr. Weirs to concede to the study as it's not valid to his experience, not reasonable. Next, I would like to talk about something that our expert witness Skylar discussed, and that glyphosate and arsenic are only carcinogens found for humans. Everything else has been debated, contradictory, and not solidified in combat, which provides a lot more than just a shadow of a doubt. Lastly, in all the discussion, both sides are able to agree unanimously that exposure of the skin and face are detrimental towards the development of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Both the plaintiff and defense representatives, Dr. Casey Rogers and Dr. Delvin Williams, stated this fact. Dakota Weirs openly admitted that both her skin and face had been exposed during her employment at Haven Landscaping, where she was just not using Lush Fertilizer. Who knows what other chemicals Dakota had been exposed to? Not expected, not reasonable. As seen in Exhibit 1, the Lush label explicitly states under its safety recommendations that protective clothing that covers exposed skin as well as a respirator, an N95 mask, is recommended to ensure individual safety. Even Dakota's boss reinforced this message to Haven Landscape employees, proving their negligence. Now, the plaintiff has argued a number of cases against this. However, we also argue the plaintiff has directly referenced Dakota as a kid. Kid is synonym for child. Also on the label, it explicitly states to keep out of reach of children. They also mentioned how Dakota was too young to work the heavy machinery. That is not a prime candidate that Lush had in mind when using their product. Furthermore, if they didn't have this in mind when using their product, and she only started at 14 years old, how is that valid and how is that just? Not reasonable, not expected. We also on the label, it says words such as hazards, recommendations, people, protective equipment, which are essential and crucial towards anyone who uses the product, as any work in the agricultural business causes risks. We heard that from Skylar herself, that anything you do, and if you just needed a job for the help pay for school, there are other jobs you can get. You didn't necessarily have to put yourself in an extremely dangerous situation. Dakota claims that everyone failed to cover their skin and faces during the summer because it was hot. Not reasonable, because Lush fertilizer included the necessary safety precautions in the label of their product, proving that Lush went to cautionary measures and attempts to prevent any risk of harm. Based on that fact alone, your verdict is not guilty. Additionally, according to jury instruction number 2, the plaintiff has not reasonably expected that consumers would follow recommendations on their label. Lush fertilizer is not to blame for this unfortunate diagnosis and the aftermath that followed. Safety is very important, and it counts on expectations and reason, which were violated in this case. When casting your vote, think of Dakota and think of your future kids or grandkids. For them, create a world where you can count on reason and expectation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Counselor. All right. Anything further from either side?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd like permission to perform my rebuttal.
All right, go ahead.
May I proceed? Sorry, thank you.
You may.
Instead of coming up here and accepting responsibility for its actions, Lush Fertilizer tried to have you believe that Dakota Weirs, a high school kid, is responsible for his own cancer. When you return to the jury room to deliberate, look closely at Exhibit 1, the label Lush Fertilizer used on its product. When you do so, examine the ethics of lying by omission. Nowhere on this label does it say anything about the consequences of not wearing protective clothing or a mask. Nowhere does it say what Lush knew about its product, that it may cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I ask, how can the innocent person that used it unknowingly be put at fault? Study after study has shown that Lush Fertilizer can cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and Devin Williams himself testified that that could be true. Ladies and gentlemen, we have seen more than enough evidence today that Lush Fertilizer is singularly responsible for my client's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. We request you hold Lush Fertilizer liable for its actions and ensure it cannot infringe upon the safety of any other consumer with a verdict for the plaintiff. Thank you.
All right, thank you, counsel. Anything further from either of the parties? Hearing nothing, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead.
Sorry. The plaintiff hasn't even requested for compensation, so I just would like to point that out on the fact that I didn't know that was on the table. Thank you. No further questions.
All right, thank you, counselor. All right. Hearing nothing, this matter is now at the hands of the juror. Ladies and gentlemen of the juror, you may begin your deliberations.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And scoring panelists, before anyone gives any feedback to the group, please make sure that you upload your scores for the two teams. Magistrate Fields, I understand you're not a scoring panelist, so if there is feedback you'd like to give to the students today, you're welcome to do that while the scoring panelists are going forward, or if you want to wait until everyone's finished, you can give yours in conjunction with everybody else as well.
No, I'm happy and would be honored to provide that feedback. Do we need to sequester the scoring panelist? Does it affect the scoring?
Your Honor, I don't think it does.
Okay. All right, everyone, I just want everyone to know, and feel free to put your cameras on. while you're doing this. I'm going to keep this as brief as possible. But I can't emphasize how impressed I was with both teams, how detailed each of you were. Attorneys, witnesses, it didn't matter. The charisma, the care, you all were so charismatic. And that's kind of important. And I have to say, as you proceed with debate and depending on how this goes, as it proceeds, that's something that the scoring panels, they look for, because they want, the jurors need to be, they need to have that concrete evidence, but they need to be entertained. Okay, so just remember that. And the respectfulness, that's critical. So each and every one of you, I didn't see one person that was not doing their, even though this is kind of weird, we're living in a virtual world. We have been for 2 years, and that's just the new norm, as you've heard that before, but you were still completely respectful and articulate. There were some glitches. I, for one, had technology issues. Don't worry about that. What I always view is we can control only those things that we can actually control. So with that being said, I was extremely impressed. A couple things. When you lose an objection, and I was kind of doing it a little differently, just to try to keep an even playing field, don't take it personal if I didn't roll in your favor. But my suggestion moving forward, you make an objection and there was like, hearsay, whatever. The next time that same situation comes up, don't hesitate to make that same objection. It's a new issue. Don't just succumb to, oh, the judge just said, you know, it didn't roll in my favor. Every time that you hear the same fact pattern or the same testimony that rises to the level of making that objection, do it. Okay, there's some missed opportunities there. So just remember, and I get it, guys. I get it. It's kind of like, what just happened, but don't give up the fight on making those records. Watch your demeanor. Everybody's watching. The judge, the panelists, we're all watching your demeanor. Just be mindful of that. Aside from that, you guys, you did again an amazing job, and I kind of wish that the practitioners that appeared before me on a daily basis were as detailed and organized and respectful as each and every one of you. So kudos to all of you. Job well done.
So scoring panelists, as soon as you've submitted your scores, can you please chat me in the chat just to let me know that they've been submitted so that I can confirm that before we get any comments from any of you on this.
All right, everyone, while we're waiting, one final comment. You all are celebrating as you should be celebrating. Regardless of what happens, you guys should be proud of how well you did. So continue to enjoy and take in this moment.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor. I have a quick question, just about an objection or like on specific crosses. When somebody asks a question on a cross, right, and they say their answer like yes, and then add information, and then they go, is that a yes or a no? Is that asked and answered? Are we allowed to object asked and answered that?
So each judicial officer is going to view it a little differently. Cross-examination, you basically are allowed to provide the answer and say, isn't that true? Or is it not true?
Okay. I was just curious because yeah. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions while we're waiting?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Oh. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So I have a question in regards to timekeeping. Should the timekeeper only timekeep for their particular side or for both sides?
Pagano, I can barely hear you. I don't know if others are having that same issue.
What was that? Sorry, Your Honor.
If you can go ahead and repeat that.
So in this case, I was the only, it seemed like that I was the only timekeeper present. In that case, I was wondering if I should show the time cards for both sides or just for my team.
What do you all think about that? You've read the rules.
Well, I didn't in this case. So I was just wondering if for the future that should be done.
Whose team are you on?
I'm on Team Violet. The plaintiff.
I think that's your answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Pagano, I hope you read between the lines there.
Say it again.
Return
All right, it looks like we have all of our scores in. Sorry for that delay. I just got notification that all the scores were in. We have very brief time for the scorers to give feedback because I know you all have to get to your next room. So if you scoring panelists can give 45 seconds or less in terms of feedback. I know that's sort of general and I apologize for that, but if you've got a chance to make some closing comments, I'm sure the folks would appreciate it.
Yeah, I can go first. So overall for the group, very well researched, really good energy from everybody. It was super fun to watch. I'd say your ability to push through the technology challenges without seeming very flustered was very impressive, as the judge noted. Just overall, a really impressive process of everybody's preparation. I'd say the biggest piece of constructive feedback is just to slow down. I think when you had a lot of information to get through, or maybe you were nervous and you were coming to the end of your time, it sped up quite a bit. So just slow things down, and otherwise, really nice job.
I was going to say slow down as well. Then you guys did wonderful. I love watching this. I used to do this when I was in high school, and I have a lot of friends from my team who went on to be attorneys or actors and actresses. So you did wonderful that way. The other thing that I would say is watch kind of nervous habits a little bit. So some of you, I felt like there was one person I noticed chewing gum. And sometimes people overuse their hands. And I would say you don't want to do those things when you're trying to get them to focus on your argument. Occasional hand gestures are okay, but overall, I didn't think there was too much of that you guys did a really wonderful job. It was fun watching all of you today. Thank you.
Not to continue the repetitiveness, but talking slower and nervous habits. You all did really great. I think you guys spent a lot of time and effort into this, and you all showed up. You look great, so that's awesome. I noticed that attention to detail, and I think you guys did a good job. All the guys are wearing suits and ties, and the ladies look fabulous, and I think you guys put a lot of effort into it. But yeah, chewing gum, very distracting. I'm so sorry. You did a great job. Your objections were great. And I really think that sometimes when you get flustered, I think that you had a really good recovery. You might speak quickly, but you recovered when you got objected. And I know that's hard when you get interrupted. So congrats to everybody. And hopefully you all pursue a career in law. So good job.
All right, thank you all for this round, and you guys need to get out of here and get to your next one. So I'm going to go ahead and close the room. Thank you.